Thank you, Dory. Welcome, iAssist community, to our second webinar of our webinar series this academic year. We're really pleased today to have two presenters from the CAQDAS interest group talking about qualitative data analysis. We are going to make the slides available after the presentation, so that's possible. And as Dory said, please enter any questions that you have as you go into the chat box, and I will read them to our presenters who will answer them at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to do an introduction. So as Dory mentioned, the title of this webinar is Dueling CAQDAS, Using Atlas.ti and NVivo for Qualitative Data Analysis. We have two presenters today. The first presenter is Mandy Swigart-Hobaugh, who's the leader of the Georgia State University Libraries Research Data Services team, and she's the primary NVivo trainer for the entire campus there. We also will hear from Floria Arguelles, who is a research associate at the Cornell Institute for Social and Economic Research, CISR, at Cornell University. So we're really pleased to have both of them presenting today. It's going to be a lively demonstration of both slides and a live demo. I know you'll enjoy it, and please ask questions to make it even better as we go. So with that, take it away, Mandy.
All right, great. So I'm hoping everybody can hear me. So this is Mandy. I am the NVivo person of the duel today. And we're hoping that our main goal of today's webinar is to show you some of the kind of core or key features of NVivo and Atlas.ti. You'll see there's a lot of overlap between their basic functionality. Things may be called something a little different, but they often achieve the same thing. And you may see that one software or the other may have some additional features that the other does not, but it's hopefully this is just to give you, a general sense of what each has to offer. So let me get my next slide here, I think. Okay, so if you've never heard the acronym CAQDAS before, this is basically what it stands for: Computer Aided or Assisted Qualitative Data Analysis Software. And on this slide, I have some of the many logos of the many types of CAQDAS that are out there. There's probably even more than this, but this gives you a sense of the variety of what is available. And in terms of choosing which might work best for you or users that you're supporting, I wanted to note this guide that NYU Libraries has put together, which I have part of a screenshot for, but they have a Google Doc kind of side-by-side comparison of various CAQDAS that's very useful to maybe do some type of analysis or assessment of which one might work best for you or your users. In terms of the two we're focusing on today, NVivo and Atlas.ti, I thought we wanted to throw up on a slide how much these cost if someone were paying for them on their own. Some campuses have campus licenses. I know here at Georgia State University, we have campus license for NVivo. So the price is not as much of an issue, but this does give you a sense of these are proprietary software, so they do cost something. And now I want to switch to doing a bit of a demonstration of some of the key features in NVivo. So bear with me while I switch my screens. Okay. So hopefully you should be seeing now an NVivo project file. So I'm now in the NVivo environment. If somebody hasn't used NVivo before, it has kind of a basic look and feel that approximates a Microsoft Office environment, I would say. So there are tabs, and when you click the tabs across the top, many different options come up. Many of these same options will appear if you do like right clicking and to bring up menus. This left-hand area on the side of my NVivo screen is kind of a main navigation area through an NVivo project file. So there's the data files area, which I'm in now, and I have various files already imported into NVivo. There's the codes area, which is where in a moment I'll do a demonstration of creating codes or themes that one would use for their analysis. There's a cases area where your cases are often the units of analysis that you're looking at, so what be it people, documents, and so on. There's the notes area, which has various features such as memos, where you can make kind of notes about your project or notes about particular parts of your project. The search area is where one would store many queries and such that they worked with. The maps area is some of the types of visualizations you can do. A lot of them they call maps. And then the outputs area, which has reports, particularly is the main thing I talk about when I do NVivo training, where you can export different reports. But going back to the main data files area. So what I have in here right now are several different types of files that you can work with in NVivo. And I have the import tab selected at the top of my screen as well to kind of note the different varieties of files and software that NVivo can interface with and tools to bring in to import things into their project. So for example, this first file that I have here called #election 2020, I'm going to double click on that data file and it will actually open the data file on the right hand side. And this is a basically a data set of tweets with the hashtag, at least one of the hashtags in here is election 2020, that I was able to use a feature in NVivo up here on the import tab called NCapture to pull that data in. The NCapture feature allows you to pull in like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. It says in that alt box as I hover on it. So it's a nice feature for people that are trying to capture that kind of data to then work with the qualitative aspects of the data. So in this case, the tweet itself and doing analysis on that tweet. I'm going to close that file and just quickly note that some of the other files that are in this particular project file are audio files. So you can work with audio files in NVivo. I'll double click just to open it so you can kind of see this is what an audio file would look like. And we could do transcription within NVivo. We could do coding then in NVivo. Similar type of file is this video file. So I just double click to open this video file, which is a video of the first presidential debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump way back in 2016. So audio and visual files can work with in NVivo, and then more of your traditional text-based files such as PDFs. I've got a couple examples in here, just text documents and so on. So it has a lot of variety of what you can work with. So I'm going to now import a survey so to demonstrate one aspect of importing data into NVivo and showing how NVivo has a really nice feature when you import surveys to kind of process that data as it comes in to help you work with it in more complex ways. So I'm going to go to import and then Excel, and I have part of a survey from the American National Election Studies here. So I'm going to open that Excel file. And so this survey import window is telling me that it's going to take each row of my survey file and turn those rows into cases. So each individual survey respondent will automatically make a case for them. It will take any close-ended questions that are part of the survey and create those as something that NVivo calls attributes. So I can use those close-ended questions, like political party is one thing that was asked of these people. Another question was, do you oppose or support the Tea Party? And those close-ended multiple choice questions I can then use as a way to kind of sort and parse out how people responded to the open-ended question that's included here. So I'm going to click next to have it go ahead and go through the process of bringing this data in, this survey in. So this thing called a classification is the thing that's going to contain the attributes information, like answers to the close-ended questions. And then this last piece of this wizard is just having me verify when it's importing the information, which are the close-ended questions and which are the open-ended questions where I would do the actual reading the data, coding the qualitative data. And all looks good by NVivo's estimate. So I'm going to click next. And one other option that is a great feature with particularly NVivo 12 plus, the highest level version you can get, is you can have it do auto coding by themes and by sentiment, even on the import stage of bringing this survey in. I'm going to actually, for the purposes right now, I'm going to uncheck those because I'm going to take another approach to doing the auto coding by themes and sentiment in a later step in this presentation. So I will click finish. It is going to start bringing in my survey here. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to get processed. There we go. Awesome. All right. So here it's now opened, brought in the survey, opened it, and it's showing me the columns that are here are my close-ended types of questions. So again, the column I have selected at the moment that has the header Tea Party is where people were asked, do you support or oppose the Tea Party? And I think they basically had choices of support, neither oppose or support, and oppose, and some other close-ended questions. And then this final column is the qualitative answer or question, open-ended question that I can then do more analysis for themes on. So that is bringing in a survey. I'm going to bring one other file in before I start working more with some of the themes, and that is just a Word document that's a transcript of this first presidential debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. So I'm going to take a right-click approach and just go to Import Items and find that transcript that I want to bring in and then import it. And it will bring the file in. I'll just say okay to this. And then now I have that transcript Clinton-Trump debate in here. I'll double click it to open it. And so here's my transcript that I can start working with. So now that I have a couple files in here, I'm going to show kind of the basic process that most qualitative researchers are first going to need to take in their analysis, and that is creating the codes that they plan to then read their data and code for. So in NVivo, I would go over to codes and then click on nodes, and it opens up this blank pane, and then I can start creating my codes. So I'm going to pretend for the sake of this presentation that I am a scholar of debates. I like to analyze debates amongst politicians. And one thing I'm curious about is looking at what I consider debate strategies that people employ when in a debate. So I'm going to create a node in NVivo that I use the node feature to create my codes. Oops. and I'm going to call it debate strategies. And I'm going to create some sub-nodes under debate strategies of specific types of debate strategies. And in NVivo language, your main node, like this debate strategies, is called a parent node. And then any sub-nodes you make under it would be called child nodes. So that's in part why I check this box that says aggregate coding from children, because I'm going to make some child nodes under this main node of debate strategies. So I have it. So now I'm going to right click on it and select new node to make some other child nodes. So one particular strategy that I noticed in this particular debate that seemed to be employed was sometimes speakers would call their opponents by their first name only as a way to undermine their opponent's authority. So that's a theme or strategy I want to code for. So I've created that as a debate strategy. And then I'm going to make another child node called interrupting as a different type of debate strategy. And I'll say speakers interrupt opponent. And I might think maybe that's a way that they undermine their authority. Maybe I'm curious and I might see patterns that there's gendered practices of interrupting. Maybe men are more likely to interrupt women, or women are more likely to interrupt men. And I'm going to click OK. So now I've set up some basic codes that now it's time for me to start reading my data and doing some analysis with those codes. So if I look at this particular transcript, so this was a transcript that Lester Holt, who is signified in my transcript as LH, was the moderator, and then Hillary Clinton, signified as HC, was the first person to speak. And the first thing she does is call Donald Trump just by his first name. So I want to code that as a first name only instance. So I've highlighted what I want to code, and then I can either try dragging and dropping this text onto the first name only node, and I will try that, and it worked. So now I have over here in my node that says first name only, it says I have one file coded at this node at this point and one reference, which in NVivo, a reference means a passage of text. In my transcript itself, if I want to see more visually what kind of coding I've done, I'm going to turn on this thing called the coding stripes. And now I have these kind of vertical coding stripes that shows spatially what I've coded. And then as I click on them, it highlights what I've coded. So basic approach to coding qualitative research, this is fairly a common first process. Is somebody has research questions, they create nodes or codes that are guided by their research questions, they start reading their data, and they code for those nodes. Another possible process is people may just start reading their data, and as something grabs their attention, they may highlight that text and then code it at a theme. So for example, Lester Holt starts to talk, and he asks his first question of Hillary Clinton and asks about, why are you the better choice than your opponent to create the kinds of jobs that will put more money into the pockets of American workers, is what that should say. There's a typo there. I could change that typo by going to click to edit, and then I can quickly correct that typo. And then I'm going to take myself out of edit mode again, just so I don't inadvertently start editing things I don't want to edit. So he asked that question, and then in Hillary Clinton's response, this sentence right here that I'm highlighting caught my attention, because she said, first we have to build an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top. And when I saw that, I thought of that really speaks to kind of that discourse of the time, particularly that election, of the 99% versus the 1%. And so I'm going to highlight that text, select code by right-clicking, and then I'm going to create a new node that I'm going to call 99%-1% discourse. And I'll say okay. So now I've kind of created a new code on the fly, and you can see it's over here on my left-hand side, and I've got a coding stripe bar to represent that I've coded for that. So that basic approach is a lot of what qualitative research is about, and using these softwares helps kind of contain it, keep it in one file and manage it. But a lot of what I've shown at this point is fairly analogous to if somebody would actually have printed out this transcript, they could have easily, circled or highlighted and written notes in the margins to indicate their coding as well. So now I'm going to try to move on to some more, I would say, advanced features or automated features in NVivo that then show how it can kind of move somebody beyond some of the limitations of sticking to just manual coding. So one thing I want to show is this particular transcript. So it's multiple people talking. We have Lester Holt, we have Hillary Clinton, and we have Donald Trump. And we might want NVivo to recognize this transcript as it's 3 different people. And so we can use an auto coding feature on the file to have NVivo automatically go through and collect everything that Lester Holt says into a case called Lester Holt, and everything that Hillary Clinton says into a case called Hillary Clinton or HC, and so on. So that process is pretty seamless. I can just right-click on the file in this list view, select Auto Code. I'm going to auto code it by speaker name. So I'm going to click next, and then I have to tell it the identifiers for my different speakers. So these are my 3 identifiers for my speakers in this particular debate. When I look at the preview and kind of scroll through, I can see it's starting to recognize the difference between Lester Holt and Hillary Clinton. It's color coding, and then once Donald Trump speaks, we see blue as his color. So it's good that it seems to know what I'm trying to tell it to do. So I'm going to click next. It's going to ask me if I want to create a classification for it, because that classification will then let me do things like define attributes about my debate speakers, such as their gender, their political party, and so on, that I might use for analytical comparisons. So I'm going to click Finish. And it's collecting all these people's, the 3 people's different segments that they're speaking into cases. So now if I look at, for example, these coding stripes on my right-hand side, I can see that there's this big stripe called LH, and every segment of when LH or Lester Holt speaks is coded as that case of LH, similar HC, and so on. And then over in my cases area on this left-hand side, I can also then see the collection of the different cases for each of them. So I can see, for example, just from this quantification of each time they spoke, that Donald Trump in this debate spoke 121 different times, whereas Hillary Clinton only spoke 87. And that might give me another indication that I had this sense that sometimes there was interrupting going on, and I'm guessing that Donald Trump was interrupting her the most because he spoke the most. So I could go through and find those places where he interrupts and do coding on those cases. And now with these cases as well, as I mentioned, it created something called a case classification, a debate speaker case classification, where I can add attributes about my debate speakers that I want to use for comparative purposes. So maybe I want political party and I can do their different possible political party attributes of Democratic, Republican, independent, and so on. And so now I've got those attributes defined for a political party, then I can assign the appropriate attribute. So DT is Republican, HC is Democrat, and Lester Holt, we don't really care for our purposes what his affiliation is, so I'm just going to say not applicable. So that is a way, again, to take a transcript and get NVivo to recognize that there's multiple people speaking in that transcript. Now, a really interesting and newer feature in the most recent and highest version of NVivo 12 Plus, is the ability to have NVivo auto-code qualitative data for themes. So to have NVivo basically crawl through and try to find themes. So I'm going to give a demonstration of this using that survey data I brought in. So I'll double click and open again to remind you that the qualitative question in this survey data was, people were asked, what does the Tea Party stand for? So now I'm going to have NVivo kind of text mine through all these 1,240 answers and try to pull themes automatically from that. So to do that, I'm going to right click on the file, go to Autocode, and I'm using the default option here where it says identify themes. So it'll automatically analyze my files and identify frequently mentioned ideas or concepts. So I'll click next. It's going to start going through, churning through, trying to find these concepts. It's churning through 1,240 short responses, and it went pretty quickly, so that's nice. And so the top theme it found was something about government. It says there's 102 mentions of government. And if I expand that, I see that then the sub-themes that it identified are basically kind of phrases that involve the word government. So I kind of look at this auto coding by themes. I call it a glorified word frequency query in that it's basically looking for frequently occurring words and then kind of some of the a couple of contextual words around it. So what can it tell me analytically? I think it's a good thing to try out on your data to see, does it pull out relevant themes? So for example, for this question, what does the Tea Party stand for? The sub themes are things like limited government, small government, something about big government. So there's lots of separate sub themes that seem to have that kind of common theme of something about the Tea Party maybe being against big government. We can't tell much at the moment. We can't really dig as much into it. But if we take this all the way to its end of auto coding, I'm going to have it code the entire answer of the text and save it in the auto-coded themes subfolder. We'll hit finish. So it's applying those auto-coded themes. It's first going to generate this hierarchy chart visualization, which I personally find not that helpful. I'm going to switch to this matrix of display of where it's showing me some of the counts of the those themes are those cells of data coded at government and so on. And then I'm also going to go over to the nodes area over here and look at the auto-coded themes here to be able to look at in more detail than some of the themes that had it here. So what I recommend to people is if they go through with the auto-coded themes process, that then they should dig in and explore what is actually being said. So this code on big government, if I open that up, it's going to show me the 4 instances where somebody was talking about big government and how they thought the Tea Party is against big government. And then I might see that there's like another code further down that says large government. If I double click to open that, I will find that it's basically the same theme as the big government theme. So I might decide, well, I want to merge the large government theme that it found. So I cut it and I'm going to merge it into the one called government theme, or sorry, big government, so that then it will just compile those together because they're essentially the same thing. So it's a nice way to get some initial themes. I got to make sure I give Florio plenty of time. I'm probably going over another type of autocoding that you can do in NVivo.
And it's 11:34. Just so
Okay. Yes. What was that?
We're at 11:34.
34. Yes, I just looked at that. Yeah. So I won't demonstrate the sentiment analysis autocoding theme. It's fairly comparable to the feature of being able to autocode by themes. You can also have NVivo go through and comb through your data and autocode by sentiment. So it will try to discern is somebody being positive versus negative versus neutral. And it's a nice seamless feature to get that kind of data, but it is again a thing where I caution people that you need to really dig into what it has it coded as negative and positive and make a judgment for yourself as to how accurate it is really being. So it's these features, this autocode by theme and autocode by sentiment, are very much trying to appease the text mining crowd. I would say that NVivo is trying to beef up its software to appeal to the text mining crowd, but I think that those of us who are more hardcore qualitative researchers have lots of reservations about text mining and its utility. So when I talk about it in NVivo, I do a lot of, let's critique this, let's look at this, let's think about this to make sure that it's going to be useful to us. So there's lots of other features that I have not been able to show because there's not enough time. I usually teach, a 4-hour workshop in NVivo, but hopefully that gives you a taste of what's there. And now I want to turn it over to Florio so he can maybe kind of contrast a little bit of similarities and differences with Atlas.ti. So give me a moment while I change Florio to the presenter. And I believe I've done it. So I will hand it to Florio now. Good. I see your slide, Florio.
My screen, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
I am, Florio. This is
okay,
Mandy.
That's good.
Yeah.
So one of the things that our Atlas.ti cannot do would be the one that Mandy just showed us, which is about sentiments, autocoding for sentiments. It's something that Atlas.ti cannot do at the moment. And also autocoding for themes. We would have to code manually for themes at the moment. The software that I'm using right now is version 8 of Atlas.ti. I was informed that there will be a new version coming up, version 9, and it will be out next month. So we'll see if that schedule, they will be true to their schedule with regards to showing it. In order to use Atlas.ti, we just need to create this new, click this new project, and then just enter a name for a project name and hit create. As you can see, it's very similar to the GUI, or the graphical user interface, is very similar to NVivo, but not much clutter here in terms of the Explorer, or the navigation panel in NVivo. So you have just the documents. You can see here later on, once we add documents, the documents and the codes, the memos where you can write your analysis or notes, the networks where links of codes or other relationships that you define along the way can be displayed or shown. The document groups, which is similar to creating an attribute in NVivo, and the code groups. So memo groups is simply a group of memos, codes are simply a group of codes, and so on. Same thing with network groups, and multimedia transcript if you have transcripts of interviews. Now, in order to start using an Atlas.ti, you just need to click Add Documents here, and this will allow you to, you can see here the types of formats that Atlas.ti can actually import or process. As you can see, there's several options here at the bottom: Atlas.ti documents, the audio documents, the various formats that you can use, graphics, PDF, text documents, video documents. These kinds of formats are actually something that Atlas.ti can import and process. Now, Atlas.ti is not just used for processing transcripts, for example, audio, video files. A lot of our researchers are actually using it also for their literature review. That's why PDF document is also very important here. Now, the workshop, the files that I'm using here are actually the files that came from the NVivo sample files. And I use that so that I'll be able to compare that, show what NVivo can do and Atlas.ti can do for the workshops that we offer here at Cornell. I actually teach both workshops here. So to import those files, all you need to do is select those files that you will use. So we have here about 9 interview transcripts in Word, 2 video files, and then 1 audio file, and just hit open. So as soon as you add those documents to your project in Atlas.ti, you can see here under in the Explorer panel the list of documents that you've added, and you can just view them by simply double-clicking on the file. And it opens as this tab. This tab here displays the contents of the document, and on the right-hand side is actually the margin area where you can see the codes, memos, and all the other entities that Atlas.ti that you will be creating along the way when you analyze your data. So this is a transcript of Barbara, and the topic is actually about environmental changes down east, and in this case, down east is North Carolina. And there were 6 topics that were asked here: their connections to down east, their connection to down east natural environment, and then there's another one: professional perspective on down east, community and environmental change, vision for the future of down east, and barriers to opportunities for achieving your vision. So these are 6 questions that were asked, main questions that were asked of all respondents in this particular study. So one of the findings of this study is actually that they found that there's a decline in the fishing industry down east. So I'm just going to focus on that and look at those codes. Give you an example how to code in Atlas.ti. If we go to here, one of the reasons for the decline in the fishing industry is that it's due to the cost of doing business, and that's one of those issues that were raised. And then there's the due to environmental impacts, and then due to foreign competition. So in this, you will look for this under Barbara. Let me just go here. And that has to do with such complex situation. This is coded as due to environmental impact. And the way you would code in Atlas.ti, you simply have to select the quotation, the segment of text that you want to code, and then right click on it and then hit open coding, and then just type due to environmental impacts, and then create. Now, if you want to apply the same code again, which is actually this case here, it's going to be applied also. It talks about environmental impacts. You can just right click on it and then choose a different way of coding, which is list coding. Okay, and then apply, and then check this box, which is due to environmental impacts. The list coding will actually display all the codes that you have defined so far, and then hit OK. And another reason for the decline in the fishing industry is that it's due to the cost of doing business. So again, select the quote that you will code as due to cost of doing business, and then just hit open coding, and then just type in due to cost of doing business, and then hit create. Now, if there are some codes that you want to predefine in your analysis and you don't have a segment of text that to apply it to, you can actually predefine them by just going to the home menu and then go to the code manager and then define them there. Okay, so you would have to say there's a free code option. One of the tools that you can choose there is create free code, and then just say that this is the reason for decline in fishing industry. Now, this is one way of creating a parent code in NVivo, and the way you would do that is simply linking all these other codes that you have created earlier that are under what you would consider the child of reasons for decline in fishing industry. So what you could do is just drag one over the other, which is to establish a relationship between these two. You can see the density here, that the density is currently 0. The density is simply how many codes are linked to that particular code. Okay, so you just drag one code over the other, release that, and then specify a relationship between the two, and so on. And then the same thing with the other one. Drag one code over reasons for decline in fishing. And as you can see, as soon as I establish a relationship with the two, the density increases by 1 for each of those child of the parent reason for decline in fishing. The other option for creating this parent code would be creating a code group, which is simply selecting those codes that belong to the same category, and then drag them on this code groups panel, release them, and then just create a code group name for that. Call it reasons for decline in fishing industry. Yeah. So as you can see here in the Explorer panel, you can see that there are 3 codes now, and another code groups. There's also 3 of those. Now there are other things that other options for coding. I'm just gonna quickly show them to you. Earlier, Mandy showed you about coding by speaker third. The way that is doable in the way that is done in Atlas.ti, you would have to right-click on the document that you're interested in. Consider this like a focus group document, and then look for focus group coding, because the pattern, the speaker turn patterns are available using this particular focus group coding option. So in this case, if you look at the manuscript, the Barbara manuscript, the pattern is actually the name followed by a colon. So you can just use this pattern 1 and then hit next, and it will detect the speakers and code them. Okay, and it's coded successfully. As you can see, just like what Mandy showed you earlier, if you look at the codes under Barbara, there were 16 instances that Barbara responded to the 16 questions that were raised by Henry. So it's an even number of talk time, not really talk time, but turns in terms of this particular interview. Another way that you could code this is by using some sort of, so under documents, you can use the focus group coding by actually searching for custom patterns. This is one of the really cool feature of Atlas.ti, because you can see the pattern of the transcript that there were asked. Each one was asked a block of questions, right? Q1, Q2, and then in between question 1, there were a bunch of this back and forth between Henry and Barbara. You can actually create a code block for this by simply right-clicking on the document, do focus grouping, and then use a custom pattern for it. And that custom pattern would be just follow the pattern Q. It was each one started with a Q dot and then followed by a number, and you can just specify a regular expression for it. And then period. That was the other part of the pattern. And then you hit next, and then Atlas.ti will detect everything that's that matches that pattern, and then hit code. As you will see later on, you can see that this entire block was coded as Q1, and it actually it ended when Q2 actually started, and then there's a Q2 code. So you can do this for every document that you have in your project, and then do a report. And the way you would do a report is just you go back to the code manager, and let's say, for example, hit Q1, select Q1, and if you want to focus your analysis on question 1, you can just hit Q1 and then hit report, and then tell the software, hey, create the report and display everything coded as Q1. Okay, so you have later on, if you do this for every single document that you have, you will have a very focused document on this particular topic on their connection to Down East or Q1. Okay? And then you can save this document as a Word document, and then this can also become another input, another file that you can process in Atlas.ti. Now, earlier I linked some codes, and then you can actually visualize these relationships by simply clicking on the code that you have linked with the others. This one, for example, due to environmental impacts and reasons for decline. Just looking for if you want to visualize the relationship that you've defined, you just right-click on that. Sorry, not right-click, but click on reasons for decline of fishing, and then hit this open network there. And you can see this relationships using this network visualization tool, which is the network view. And this is a really cool feature of the software, because all you need to do as soon as you find relationships between codes or among your codes, you just keep on defining them. Don't worry about remembering them, because the software will remember them for you. Now, the other features of this software is this analyze tool, which is similar to where there is a co-occurrence table code co-occurrence, which allows you to see if there are codes that are actually co-occur with the with other codes in your analysis. That's something that Mandy, I believe, mentioned to you. If she showed the coding matrix in NVivo. I'm almost out of time, but that's something that you can explore. But one really cool tool here is this query tool in Atlas.ti, and it's something that you should be aware of, where you can see, you can choose to see whether some quotations, if you want to search for quotations that meet certain conditions, you can actually search for them by simply selecting them. Like, for example, here, I'm selecting whether there's Barbara. If Barbara is within a particular quotation or code Q1, I can select Barbara and then specify that Barbara is within, for example, Q1, code Q1. Atlas.ti will search for that particular, for quotations that meet those conditions. And then it found that these are the quotations that meet those conditions. And then you can actually save that as a code, as a smart code. It says Barbara within Q1 create. Okay. And then if you go back to the code manager, you will see the quotation, the code Barbara within Q1 created for you. And it says that there are 5. The groundedness is 5. The groundedness means that there are 5 quotations coded as Barbara within Q1. And then if you double click on that, it will simply display all those. These are the quotations that meet the condition. Barbara is within the code Q1. So if you look at, if you want to see them in context, you just double click on the code, and there it is. You can really see that Barbara, the code Barbara, is within Q1, right? So this tool in Atlas.ti is so powerful that the query expression could be very complex. That you define could be very complex. So I only have 5. We only have 5 more minutes. I would like to provide more time to you guys to ask questions. So I'll probably just stop there.
Florio, thank you so much. And maybe seeing the questions, go ahead and throw the controls back over to Mandy. I think there's a request for her to demo something, but the first question is going to go to you while you're doing that.
Okay.
So the first question is there a way to see code hierarchy visually in Atlas.ti?
To what?
Is there a way to see the code hierarchy visually?
Yes, that's right. There is. So earlier, I created a code in the code manager. I created this code group. You can actually build that here. I created this code group, and within the code group, I can actually select that code group, and then I just right click on it, and then display open network.
Okay.
Right.
Great.
So you can actually build it from here, and you can establish links between this and other codes, and then you'll be able to see the network of relationships. Some of these codes can be siblings. Some of these codes can be a parent, and so on.
Okay. The next question is about NVivo. Is it possible to do a cluster variable analysis in NVivo?
A cluster variable analysis. So there is something called a cluster analysis, but I'm not sure if that approximates what a cluster variable analysis means. But I could show like a cluster analysis. You can do, let me try doing one by, I don't know if I have enough coding going on in my data to really do one. But you can do a cluster analysis by codes, which would be, it shows a visual of where do codes kind of coexist with each other or tend to appear together, and which codes are more like dispersed from each other and don't cluster together. So I'm not sure if that's what is being asked. Was that?
I think that's what they were asking. I think that's really helpful.
Okay. Yeah. So like I said, I mean so there is the cluster analysis. I went to explore and then cluster analysis. So I could try to maybe demonstrate it, but sometimes if you're not if your data is not fully coded yet, it's probably not going to really produce anything. But that might be what.
Another question about NVivo that we received was about the auto coding that you were showing. A user, attendee is curious about how transparent NVivo is about the mechanism of auto coding, or is that just a black box?
It's kind of a black box. Yeah, I mean there is help, online help. So like I'm in the, if you guys can see my NVivo screen, I think right now, because I'm sharing again. If I go to the online help and then try to look for say the auto coding kind of documentation, so automatically detect and code themes, they don't give you a lot of what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, they do explain their process, you know, on a surface level, but from like if you were a hardcore text miner and you actually knew, I'm not a hardcore text miner, so I don't know what I would want to see as far as documentation, but I have a feeling that it's probably, they probably don't provide as much as what people would maybe want to have.
Thank you. I think we are right at the 12 o'clock hour, and we've had both some very good questions and really great detail and overviews of these two dueling packages from both Andy and Florio. Thank you so much for joining us today. And to the audience, thank you for your attending. And you will receive both the webinar link and the slides, and eventually the presentation and webinar file will be up on the YouTube channel, so you can go back and reference some of the very good details that both Florio and Mandy provided in a very short time. I really appreciate it. Thank you to both of you, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.